So, I'm going to tell you the story of my attempt to cross the Canadian border in April of 2022. I'm in Canada now, and I came through, and so I was going over the Ambassador Bridge in Detroit, and I'm just going over, and everything's fine, and I got all my documents ready and everything, and so I get over the bridge, and there's like this thing that says like trucks this way, cars that way, you know, and I'm like, oh, I'm a car, so I go in the car lane, and the dude's like, you know, this way. So I go in the car lane. There's not many cars. It was like, the bridge stretch was like 90% semis and just a couple cars, you know. So the car lane was not very, you know, not many people in there. So I follow the lane right where I'm supposed to go. And when I get around, there's like 4 lanes that cars can go through. But then like 3 of them are full of semis. And I don't understand. And they're backed up. Like as soon as I came out of my lane, you know, like all the lanes for the gates were like backed up and I couldn't get into them, you know. So there's only one lane open. It said NEXUS lane. And I was like, well, I don't know what this is. I don't think I'm supposed to go to it, but I couldn't get another lane. I was like sitting there and like there's all these semis and they're not going to let me in, you know. So I'm like, I'll just go in this NEXUS lane, whatever that is. So I go in the lane and I pull up to the window, you know. And there was 2 guards in there, 2 Canadian guys in there, and like right away as soon as I pulled up, he's like, hello, and he says, sir, what was your intention today in coming through the NEXUS lane when you're obviously not a NEXUS member? And I was kind of thinking like, how do you know I'm not a NEXUS member? You know, and he's like, if you were our you know, we would have, you know. Our sensor would have gone off already because you have a card or something. He's like, we would have gone. So why are you coming through the NEXUS lane? I said, I'm sorry, it was an accident. I said, it was an accident. Like, see all these semis? I couldn't get in. He's like, it happens. And he's like, all right. And then he's like, it's like, all right, where are you going? You know, and so now I start to panic a little bit because I'm already feel like I messed up by going in the NEXUS lane, you know? So yeah. So he's like, where are you going? And immediately I start overthinking it. I'm like, does he mean where's my final destination? Or does he mean where are all the places I'm going? Because I'm going to Lucan, I'm going to London, and I'm going to Hamilton. So I tell him I'm going to, you know, I'll be in London and then I'm going to Hamilton. But I don't tell him I'm going to Lucan because I wasn't staying there very long. Mm-hmm. That's basically by London, you know. He's like, who's in Hamilton? You know, why are you going there? You know, like, what's the purpose? So I'm going to visit some friends. It's like, what kind of friends? Like romantic, like women? You know, you're visiting women? You know, and I'm like, no, it's not like that. It's not romantic. It's just friends, you know. He's like, what kind of friends? How do you know these people? And now I'm trying to think, how do I explain this? Because like I never met you guys in real life. You know, so I'm like, I said professional acquaintances. And he's like, so what, you work with these people? What do you do? I said, I'm a teacher. He's like, so who are these people? I said, these are the families of people that I teach. And he's like, so what, you live in America, but you teach in Canada? I'm like, no, I live in America and I teach in America, but these are my students in Canada. And he's like, what, you drive over and teach here or something? I'm like, no, it's all online. He's like, oh, you know, he's like taking notes, or at least pretending like he is, you know. He's like, what do you teach, you know? I'm like, I teach high school history, you know. And he's like, okay, you know. And then he's like, so you're going to London, then you're going to Hamilton, you know. I'm like, yes, I'm going to London, going to Hamilton. So he's like, all right, roll down your windows, we're going to look around. So I roll down my windows. And they're looking around, and he's like, sir, tell me everything you have in the car except for clothes. Now I'm a little bit nervous because I had in the car for my friends in Lucan, before I came to Canada, they're like, I think this is a Canadian thing, they're like, can we ship some stuff to your house and you bring it over because the shipping is so expensive. So the wife had shipped $100 worth of women's clothes to my house, and then the husband had shipped a light, like a magnetic light that you put on the top of your car and plug in with like into your, you know, outlet. What? And I didn't want to be like, yeah, I have women's clothes in here and I have like a light, you know. So I'm just like, oh, I have a bear and I have a mandolin, and he's like, bear and ukulele, you know. I'm like, oh, okay, and I'm like, it's actually a mandolin, and he's like, okay, and then he's like, he's like, okay, all right. So I was just afraid he's gonna like, well, I don't know. Anyway, so he's like, all right, sir, and he writes out this big pink piece of paper, and he's like, he sticks it in my windshield. He's like, you're gonna drive over there. You're gonna go into this room. You're gonna park. You're gonna have your car searched, and they'll tell you what to do. So do whatever they tell you. So I'm like, oh gosh. So I drive over there. I got like nothing in my car except this stuff. It's all clean, you know. So I drive over to the place. I drive in the room, and there's all these poor people having their cars, you know, taken apart. And I go in there, and this lady walks up, a guard, and then I'm kind of like, hi, and she's like, hi, get out of your car, you know. And I get out of the car, and then she's like, so I hear you went through the NEXUS lane. And she had this face like, what kind of psychopath goes through the NEXUS lane when he's not a NEXUS member? I'm like, yeah, it was an accident. And she's like, stand in front of the hood, you know. So I'm like standing there, and I'm like, and then these two other guards come. So there's three guards, she's like asking me the same thing. What's in Hamilton? Like, why are you going to Hamilton? You know, all this stuff. I'm like, see these friends of mine. Oh, I understand you're a teacher. Blah blah blah. You know, what's in the case? It's a mandolin, although it might say ukulele on the page, you know. And I kind of like step over here like this, and she's like, stand in front of the, don't move, you know. Like, okay. So I'm like, oh, this is gonna turn to a police shooting or something, you know. So then they open my car, and they just start like eviscerating the inside of the car. Like I can hear them. I can hear like the zippers being opened on all my luggage. Like I can hear them opening the case of the mandolin. You know, I can hear them going through my glove compartment. And I'm like, oh, they're going to find all the women's clothes, you know, and they're going to be like, they're going to hold up these women's and be like, what's this, sir? You know, like, I'll be like, this is 2022. Like people wear what they wear.
You shouldn't be asking.
Yeah, like,
did you just assume?
I would rather let her think that than admit that I was bringing clothes over for my friends. So that's what I'm smuggling, ma'am. You know. So at any rate, so they're just going through everything, you know, and they were pretty thorough. Like they went through every orifice of that car, you know. So then this guy comes out, and the guy comes out. He's like, oh, what instrument is that in the case? You know, he's like being good cop, you know. It's like, hey man, you gotta play. What instrument is that? I'm like, that's a mandolin. He's like, sweet mandolin, you know. And then we're kind of talking. Then the lady's like, okay, you're gonna go into you see these doors. You're gonna go through these doors. You're gonna go into this room and take all your documents, and you'll be told what to do, you know, when you get into the room. So I take all my documents and I leave, and they're still like rummaging around in my car, you know. So I go into the room, I open this door, it's like a sliding door, and I go in, and there's all these like there's like a couple of lost souls in there, you know, like people who, like, there was this Sikh guy with a turban, you know, and he was like holding a bundle of papers, and he was like, you know, like he was like trembling, you know, and there was and there was this like American redneck guy that was like, I don't know why I'm in here, like, this is BS, you know, like there's like these people, they're just like everybody that fell through the cracks, like me, like, oh, I'm like, did you go through the NEXUS link? I didn't talk to them though. So I walk up, and I go up to the counter, and I put my, you know, credentials down on the counter, my passport and whatnot. And this huge guy comes up. He's like a full head taller than me. He's bald. He's got like tattoos on his arm, huge beard with a little mask on, you know. And he's like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "The lady told me to come in here." Why? I don't know. She told me to come in here and present my credentials. So here. Then he's like. Like it's like the biggest irritation. He's like, he takes out a notepad. All right, give me your yellow slip. I'm like, well, excuse me? He's like, your yellow slip. They gave you a yellow slip. I need the yellow slip. And I'm like, I don't have a yellow slip. They gave me nothing. And he's like, I think he's like visibly irritated. And he's like, where are you going? You know, Sam, Hamilton. You know, and he's like writing. And then he like interrogated me like every single, like he asked so many questions, like everything about my life.
Oh.
So he starts again, where are you going? Hamilton and London, you know, why, you know, to visit friends, how do you know them? I teach, blah, blah, blah. Oh, how do you teach people that live in Hamilton when you live in, you know, why would someone from America travel to Canada to meet people they teach? You know, that's weird, you know. And he's like, what school you teach for? I said, Homeschool Connections, it's online, you know. And he's like, okay. And he kind of writes down, I think he's writing down Homeschool Connections. And he's like, so what, you just, you know, what do you just teach online then? You know, and I'm like, yeah, well, I teach, you know, from home. And then like these people, they're all over the country and they come to my classes online. And you know, so we're having like a hangout, you know, and I'm gonna go jam with these people in Hamilton, you know, it's gonna be fun, you know, and he's like, where are you staying, you know, and I'm like, well, this night I'm staying here, and then I'll be staying in Hamilton, and he's like, is this a sure thing, or are you just driving there and hoping they're gonna let you crash on their couch or something? Like, did you clear this with them? I was like, yeah, I got plans, you know, it's legit, you know, like, I'm like, do you want their phone number? He's like, no, you know, like you can verify this. So he's like, all right. And he's like, when you going home? I'm like, Sunday. And he's like, you have to go home Sunday, or you're just like, maybe you'll go home Sunday, maybe you won't, you know? I'm like he obviously is thinking like, if I'm going to be like, come here for the weekend, be like, Canada's a nice place, I'm just gonna stay, you know? So like, I'm like, no, I have to be home Sunday. And he's like, why? What's home? And I'm like, you know, like where I live, I don't know. He's like, well, why do you have to be home? And he's like, well, I have kids. And he's like, so? And I'm like, he's like, how old are they? I'm like 6 through 20, you know? And he's like, so what? You know, you got to be back there or something? I'm like, well, yeah, I gotta like, you take care of them, you know, like I have to like give them food and stuff. So I was like, okay. And then he's asking about Homeschool Connections, like, what is this place, you know? And he's like, has it always been online, or it's, you know, just since COVID? I'm like, no, we've been online since 2008. He's like, dang, you know, and I'm like, we're one of the first all online academies, you know, over blah, blah, blah. And then he's asking me questions that aren't even about me. He's like, he like in his interrogation voice, he's like, why would anyone send their student to an online academy when you could go to a public school? And I'm kind of like thinking like, that's not really a question about me. Like that's like, he asked me to explain the merits of homeschooling, or like, you know, I don't know. So I'm like, well, so I'm kind of like, you know, I don't want to say anything about the Canadian public school. I don't know anything about it. So I said like, I don't know why Canadians do it, you know, but I was like, this is a Catholic institution, and maybe, you know, parents who want their kids to have like a Catholic education but don't want to send them to the parochial school because they can't afford it. Like maybe they send them here, and he's like, what do you mean can't afford it? Are your Catholic schools private in the United States? And I said, yeah, it's like thousands of dollars. And he's like, well, it's not like that here. And I was like, no. And he's like, yes, we have a tax system where, you know, and then he like explains how schools are funded in Canada. He gives me a little lesson. He's like, on your taxes, you mark. He's like, on your taxes, you mark which school, you know, and it's taxpayer fund. I'm like, well, you know, and he's kind of like, just like giving me this, he's kind of like wasting my time, like just, you know, and so I kind of lost my cool a little bit, and I said, like, am I in trouble? I was like, is this because I went through the NEXUS lane? You know, I was like, did I do something wrong? And he's like, no, this is just a standard immigration interview, you know, or whatever, you know, immigrant interview, you know, and he's like, you ever had one of these? And I said, yeah, I was in Aruba last year, and they pulled me out of line and interrogated me. And he goes, typical. And I was like, what is that? Like, do you know what the Aruban immigration customs are that you like? He's like, oh, of course, in Aruba they do that. It's like, how do you even know? So he's like, we're just having a conversation, sir. And I'm sure you can appreciate the importance of us screening people that come into our country. I'm like, yeah, but okay. So he's like, so you tell me about your history. You know, he's like, problems with the law? You know, I'm like, no. And he's like, you ever been in the back of a cop car? And then I was like, And I was thinking, and then I was thinking like, you know, well, when I was 16, you know, like I'm thinking this, when I was 16, I got you know, in trouble for drinking underage, and I got in trouble. And then there was another time when I was in a cop car once when I was young, you know. And but it was like a long time ago. So I'm in my head. I'm like, do I need to mention? And he's like, you're in a cop car. And he's like, you hesitated. And I was like, I was when I was 16, but I'm 41 now. Does that matter? And he's like, no. You know. And he's like, so you're not bringing any cannabis over, you know? I'm like, you would have found it, you know. And he's like, do you have over $10,000 in cash in the vehicle? And I was like, I wish I did. And he's like, yeah, he wasn't amused, you know. So then he's like, all right, sir, go sit down, you know. And he takes his notepad and he goes to the computer and he sits down. I don't know what I think he was like Homeschool Connections, like, you know, I don't know what he was doing, or if he was just jerking my chain or what. So I went and sat down next to the Sikh guy that was like trembling and clutching a folder of some sort. And then they called him up, you know, and I overheard him and that poor guy, they were raking him over the coals. He had flown from India to Michigan, and then he was driving from Michigan into Canada. I don't know why he flew to Michigan first, but he was trying to find work. He was trying to relocate to Canada, and he was coming here to scout out jobs. And they were all like, why would you move from India? Why are you here? And he's like, I just tried to find a job, you know. And they're like, why do you want a job here? What's so? He's like, I like country. It's a good country, you know. That's more of a Russian accent than Indian, but you know, he's like, it's just good country. I like, you know. And they were just like, oh, is your family in India? How do we know you'll go back? And he's like, to my wife and kids, I will go back, I promise, you know. And they're like, how do we know? And he's just like how's he supposed to prove it? Like, you know, like get out a document, like this says I'm going back. I don't know. So this poor guy, he was like petrified, you know, that they were going to deport him or something. So I'm just sitting there, and it's like taking forever. I'm literally sitting in the chair like this, and like I'm being like a petulant 13-year-old, you know, like, ugh. Yeah. So I've been there for so long now, like, you know, 40 minutes or something. So I get up and I go to the counter. I walk up to the counter, and the guy's like, you know, and he gets up like as if I'm going to challenge him, and I'm like, hey man, is there a bathroom in here? He's like, yeah, down there. Go stand by the door, and I'll buzz you in, you know. So I'm like, geez. I go stand by the bathroom. I'm just like standing there, and he's like, and then the bathroom unlocks. It's like, this place is like a prison, you know? Yeah. So I go in there, and, you know, I do my business in the bathroom. And I come out, and I just sit down again, and just wait, and all these people, and the redneck guy's in there, and he's like, this is nonsense. I don't know why, you know? So, you know, the guy said, so I'm sitting there for a while, and I hear the guy on the phone, the bearded guy, and he calls somebody, and he's like, hey, you know that guy who says he's a teacher and he's visiting friends? And they're like, are you done with this car yet? Like, you done looking through it? Like, they're still out there ripping my car apart, you know? And he's like, okay, I'm gonna send him out, you know? And he hangs up, and he's like, Campbell, get up here. And I come up, and he's like, I'm sorry, we're gonna get you on your way, but like, I hope you can appreciate how out of the ordinary this all sounds to us. And I'm like, it only sounds out of the ordinary the way you put it, you know, kind of like, oh, you're driving, you're a teacher, you know. Oh, well, I told him I'd never met these, you know. I was like, I never met these people, you know. He's like, so you're a teacher of these people that you never met, and you're driving to Canada, you're gonna go to London. Do these people know each other? Like, he's like, so, you know, do the Bades know the Tolentinos? Like, yeah, but they've never met either. but they're friends. You know, they're friends, but they've never met. And he's like, I just don't understand this. And I'm like, look, I'm an online teacher. These families both have all have kids that I've taught. Now we're all kind of friends, but we've never met in real life, and they've never met in real life. I'm driving to London, where there's going to be a get-together with multiple families, and we're going to hang out. And then after that, I'm driving to Hamilton, where I'm going to stay with this family who's friends with the first family, but they're not going to the first thing, you know? And he's like, all right, whatever. You know, he's like, you're free to go, you know? So he's like, all I need is that yellow paper. He's like, all I need is that yellow paper, and you're free to go. I'm like, I don't have a yellow paper, I told you. And he got really frustrated. He's like, he kind of had this look of like, I process like 80 people a day, and they all have yellow papers, you know. And he put his pad down, you know, the one that he was taking notes on the whole time. He slammed it down, you know, like in frustration. I looked, and there was nothing on it except for the word Hamilton. What? And then Homeschool Connections was written on there. Like, he took no notes, you know. So it made me think it was all like a BS interrogation, you know. If they really thought I was doing something, he would have been taking notes, you know. So I'm like, I don't have a yellow piece of paper, I've told you. And he's like very irritated because apparently he needs to sign this yellow piece of paper to send me on my way, you know. So I reach in my pocket and I pull out the pink piece of paper that I was given. I'm like, this is what I have, the pink piece of paper. And he's like, oh, right, you went through the NEXUS lane. He's like, I'm sorry, I forgot. You went through the NEXUS lane. You get the pink paper.
Oh, crap.
So he took the pink paper, and he's like, you know, stamps the pink paper. He gives it back to me. He's like, here's your passport. And I open the passport up, and I'm like, oh, aren't you going to stamp my passport? Like, you stamped the paper. Don't I get a Canada stamp in my passport? And he's like, no, we don't stamp American passports.
Oh.
You know, he had this tone like, you idiot. Like, of course we don't stamp American passports. I said, you put me through all that and you're not going to stamp my passport? And he was just not amused. He's like, just go out and he's like, all you need to do now, like, he's like, go hand that pink paper to the officers and you can go. You know, you just have to turn in the pink paper to show that I stamped you saying, okay. So I go out of the building. I'm like, geez, like, it's taking forever. I go out and like, there's these 3 officers that were ransacking my car. They're all standing there just yucking it up, like having a good old time, you know. And they see me coming towards them, you know, with my pink paper in hand, and they just turn around and they leave, and they disappear into some door into the building, and I'm like, ugh? And I walk up to the door and I kind of peer, and it's like officers only, no civilians or whatever, you know. And I'm like, I'm not going in there, you know. So I'm kind of like, I kind of stand around. I'm like, who do I give this paper to, you know? So then I just like, okay, I get in my car, and I think maybe on the other side of the bridge, there's like a booth or something, or I'm already across the bridge, but I'm like, maybe, you know, there's a booth I go through or something. So but I thought he said, give it to those people, you know? So I kind of drive, and I drive right in front of their office, and like, I look in the window and I can see them all in there just kind of like having a good old time. And I kind of look at them, we make eye contact, you know, and they don't say anything. So I'm just like, all right, I'm just driving off with my pink paper. So I drive off, and I'm like, who did I give this to? And then I drive, and it just dumps me onto the 401. And then I'm like on my way with my pink paper, you know. So I'm kind of freaked out a little bit. I'm kind of like driving, but I'm thinking that the guy's gonna like, that the officers in the building are to be like, hey, when's that guy coming out with the pink paper? You know, and the guy will be like, I sent him out with the pink. Didn't he find you and give you the pink paper? So like, while I'm still in Windsor, I'm like looking in my rearview mirror, like there's gonna be lights being like, hey, NEXUS lane guy, like you didn't hand over your pink paper. Get back here, you know. So it wasn't until I got out of Windsor that I felt like I was safe, you know. And I was like,
looking for you.
Yeah. Like, so I'm just kind of like thinking, like, what was this all about? Like, was it about? Did I sound like very sus? Like, was my story like just that weird? Because he made it sound weird, the way he repeated it. He's like, what kind of teacher drives over the border in another country to visit students' families he's never met? Like, that's just, you know, that's kind of the way he, you know. And then he didn't ask why I had a stuffed bear, you know. That was nice, you know. But I was like, were they just dinking with me because I went through the NEXUS lane? Like, because all the other lanes were way backed up. The NEXUS lane had nobody in it. Were they just like, oh, this moron thinks he's going to go through the NEXUS lane and just be on his way. We'll show him, you know, call ahead like, hey, give this guy the works, you know, like, I don't know. But when I go home, I'm not going through the NEXUS lane no matter what. I'll go through any lane but that one. So, yeah, that's what happened when I came over here to this great country.
Well, we're glad you made it over.
Yay! Thank you for coming and surviving the border.
Yeah.
And Canadians are supposed to be nice, right?
We're totally nice.
Sorry we failed you. We should have told you about the NEXUS
We should have told you.
Yeah, whatever you do, don't go through the NEXUS lane. From the first moment I pulled up, they were just like, what's your intention in coming through the NEXUS lane? Like, are you worthy?
She used to have a NEXUS lane. I feel so bad. She had it and I don't. I did.
Oh, man. Yeah.
But yeah.
I'll cap it. I'll cap.